Hey everyone, welcome to Product Momentum. I'm Sean Murray, Director of Product Management here at ITX.
And I'm Dan Sharp, a Product Manager at ITX. It's our privilege to continue the Product Momentum journey, a platform that celebrates the thinkers and doers who are shaping the future of software development.
That's right, Dan. Our goal is to introduce you to industry leaders, innovators, and practitioners and bring you their insights, advice, and innovations. We talk with experts from product strategy, UX research and design, security, engineering, leadership, and more. We'll discuss how their approaches to problems help empower teams and build trust. And we'll explore trends, tools, and techniques that your team can use to deliver the software solutions your users need today. So tune in, stay curious, and join the conversation.
You can catch us on your favorite listening platform, or if you prefer the video experience, you can find all our latest episodes on the Product Momentum YouTube channel.
And if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share. That way, we can be sure to provide you with the best podcast experience.
Sean, we just had a tremendous conversation with Vitaly Friedman. He's a awesome UX design leader, doing some great work in the enterprise space, as well as generating a ton with his Smashing brand. Talked a lot about how important it is to build relationships, especially when you're trying to get a foothold in the enterprise space. What'd you get?
I think staying in that enterprise space and talking about the mindset you need to have in the enterprise space is something that we really don't talk about enough, right? We talk to thought leaders, we talk to CPOs, we talk to people that own companies, but we don't talk about what a lot of us do, which is work in this enterprise space. We're trying to make changes to legacy software where we're trying to achieve new things while still kind of like holding on to the tasks that need to be completed, but trying to approach problems in a brand new way. Vitaly's mindset could go a long way in our industry.
For sure. Well, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
All right. Our Product Momentum guest today is Vitaly Friedman. Vitaly joins us from Berlin, where he is a UX lead for the European Parliament and Smashing Magazine, which he co-founded in 2006. Smashing Magazine is a leading online magazine for designers and developers. He is the author, co-author, and editor of Smashing books, and the curator for Smashing conferences. Don't worry, we'll provide some links in the show notes for Smashing conferences. But there's more. Vitaly also is a front-end UX consultant in Europe and abroad, working with companies both large and small. But I think the most important thing about Vitaly is that he is going to be joining us in Rochester, New York, June 25th and 26th at the ITX Product and Design Conference, where he's going to lead a workshop on all things UX. We are super pumped to have you here, Vitaly.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Daniel. And I'm just listening all of that. It's like, yeah, well, I just did a couple of things
Just
here and
a
there.
couple of things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Parliament, no big deal.
yeah.
I
Well,
was listening,
some
that
of
was the
some of them are slightly more challenging than the others, I would say, yes. But overall, it's been like, everybody's life, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then before you know it, you just end up doing something that wanted to do in the first place, right? I mean, this is kind of the story of everybody's life, I guess, partially at least.
Yeah, that's the dream anyway. So why don't we dive right in? You have Smashing Magazine, Smashing books, Smashing conferences. Tell us a little bit about your journey to kind of building out that brand and bring design to people that way.
That's a good question, Daniel. I think at some point, or I'm not at some point, but every now and again, I just ask myself, what the hell am I actually doing? Like in general, like what is that thing? So if it's like this weird conversation that somebody would ask you, so what do you do for a living? I have never an answer. I never have an answer. I just have no idea what I'm doing, frankly, most of the time because that changes, and that's pretty much was like that. I think when we started. I started freelancing and doing design / development stuff, because at this point everybody was doing everything. So I was a webmaster. I was a webmaster, and I thought I know PHP really well. It turned out I know PHP really badly, and this is something I was pointed out over time, many, 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 many times. But this is where it all started, and I got into web development in some way. And then in 2006, we ended up doing this sort of magazine called Smash Magazine, which was just a place where we would collect all kind of useful nuts and bits and techniques and stuff about web design and web development. And then because I'm usually getting very quickly very bored. I moved from front-end development to accessibility, then to UX, then to design, then back to front-end, then to performance optimization, then for a very brief period of time, which I'm not very proud of, SEO, and then moving on to other things as well. So it's been like my UX has been my life for, I don't know, at least partially for the last 15 to 18 years. And throughout these years, we of course did a lot of things from books and conferences and just frankly, and I don't know if you feel like that as well when you're looking back, but I realized there was never like a big agenda. Like now we're going to do this, and the next 2 years we're going to achieve that. It was just let's try and see if it works, and let's do books, and maybe let's do conferences. And before you know it, like what, almost 20 years later, you're sitting there talking with wonderful Sean and Daniel in a podcast.
That's all to today, Dan.
Yeah, it's like a whole story of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really glad we didn't choose this episode topic of the SEO, as that would have been a bit awkward.
Yeah.
Well, I think I was joking at this point because, of course, SEO has its value. But I mean, I was a really good SEO strategist or whatever you want to call it back in the day. And I'm pretty sure I'm pretty bad one today as well.
So want to change gears a little bit. Yeah, a lot of you are writing, and the content you work on is about, UX design in enterprise space, and working with large projects. Yeah, and I'm curious, as somebody who has spent a great deal of my career working in kind of enterprise space, working with legacy applications, what are the challenges that you see, day to day working with clients there?
I think, like, in fact, what you're saying, Daniel, is probably what at the heart of everything. To me, legacy is that magical box where everybody is afraid of touching it, and nobody really knows how that works. And there are some people who set it up decades ago, and they gone years ago, and there is no proper documentation. Everybody is kind of dancing and tiptoeing around that thing, really of being afraid, literally, of breaking it or even touching it, or even speaking about it loudly. It's like this mysterious thing that you're supposed to just respect, I guess. That's definitely a part of it. But the other part that I think is a much bigger challenge that we often don't think about, especially when we're dealing with UX, is the notion of risk management. Because I think that whenever you're dealing with enterprise applications, what ends up happening is that you are affecting a lot of people who need that tool to work. Well, sometimes for the internal, as a part of the internal tooling, they need to be able to rely on it. And what's also important is they need to be able to do their work, like literally do their work, hopefully accurately, hopefully fast, hopefully not being slowed down every other minute or so of session freezing or anything like that. And so that kind of comes with a lot of challenges. There's challenges on the political level, because it kind of needs to work. It has been promised that it will be working. Any kind of delay really has an impact and has a massive cost, right? On the other hand, you also have a bit of challenges around UX and usability testing, for example, because sometimes you don't have access to users because you have some legal constraints, and there are plenty of issues around that. Or sometimes you just don't have enough users yet, or maybe just one user, right, or two. And so that kind of makes it a bit more difficult just to navigate, I would say. And also, depending on the company and the organization in which you happen to be, sometimes you just have a lot of mess and chaos. Sometimes it's a bit more organized, sometimes it's a little bit less organized, but priorities change, teams change, decisions change, business priorities change and shift, and they have tremendous consequences. And if you just work on a small project in the UX space, before you even know it, that work that you maybe will be spending the next 3 months will never be seen by anyone, because in that time, something else will be more important, and that project just disappears. And it happens, of course, everywhere. It's not just a kind of something that appears only in enterprise. But I think that very often I realize that when you're actually working on something that seems to be actually having an important kind of a big impact, right? You realize that there is quite a bit of reluctance of pushing it forward. And that, to me, in the beginning, it felt very counterproductive to me. Why is it happening? And I think I realized now why it's happening, because especially in this world, when I come in as a UX designer, I'm not being perceived, at least not in the beginning, as an enabler. I'm being perceived at best as a disruptor, at worst as an enemy. And the reason for that is because, again, I come in and look at me, I know how to deal with pixels, and I'm going to redesign the navigation to make it better for our end users. I'm going to change this and change that. And I'm actually not realizing, and I wasn't realizing at the time, like for years now, that as you are doing that, you are basically also making, how would I put it best? I would say you're disrupting the ways of working, the influence, the weight that somebody must have acquired over years and years and years. And then you come in and you just want to move pixels around. Well, pixels can be precious. I didn't realize it back in the day. So I think a lot of things, all of that coming together, kind of make it quite difficult and challenging. And plus, on top of that, you throw in some sort of complexity around the domain, around processes, around integrations, around permissions, around all of that. And then you find yourself in a very small, dark room full of dusty papers and dusty folders, and very often a very old machine that's running on I don't know what, and you have to do your UX work. That seems to be kind of an accurate picture of where we are, maybe. Maybe this is something that you can connect to.
I can definitely connect to that. I'm like Dan, I have a lot of enterprise experience, and I just to mention was very excited for this episode as we went through the pre-production process, because when we go to conferences or when we do the podcast, we end up talking to a lot of people that are at like the thought leadership level or talking about some sort of like startup mentality. And when you go to a conference and you look at the people you look at the swath of attendees, and if you just do a general look at the people, like the companies that they work for, all of them work in this enterprise space. And a lot of the content at conferences or in podcasts are more about thought leadership level and maybe not something that directly ties into this kind of enterprise working environment where when you bring a new idea in, you might be perceived as a disruptor, right?
Mhm.
So once you've embraced that role, I'm going to be a disruptor, and you also acknowledge that you are introducing risk and you might be introducing some political divisions. How do you make the case for the changes that you want to make? What's the right way to approach those situations where you are seen as a disruptor, where you want to try to change from disruptor to partner?
Yeah. I think to me, it might sound even like cliche or too simplistic in some way, but to me, it's all about building confidence and trust in that I'm here to help.
Okay.
Because by default, I don't think that this is a perception at all. I mean, first of all, whenever you kind of meet somebody and somebody's kind of maybe operating at the very heart, because this is where legacy usually lives, at the very heart, very core of the business, right? And you are here to adjust and refine and improve, whatever that means. And then it's kind of not very clear if my improvement is their improvement, really. And so I kind of need to start with small projects to build up trust. And one thing that I always do is kind of try to pull people aside and say, hey, can you just show me the product and kind of walk me through it? What are the features that we have and stuff like that? And listen very carefully to the vocabulary that they're using and how to describe the product, how to describe the features and stuff like that. And I'm just listening, right? And the more different kind of people you bring in to give you sort of a tour, the better the outcome will be, because you kind of get an understanding about how they speak and what certain things mean to them, and how much certain features or certain flows or certain ways of working mean to them as well. So for me, kind of just getting this broad overview about where we are is helpful. Vocabulary is also very helpful. Understanding the relationship between different stakeholders, really trying to find out who are the people maybe inside of the organization or company who actually really believe in and want to support UX initiatives. Because there is a high chance that there were some UX projects that actually were extremely successful. And people who actually benefited from them, they want to have more of that. So if you find people who deeply believe in UX, and you kind of tell them a story about the project that you're going to do here, they really will want to maybe move mountains for you and carry you and support you if they only know that you existed. So in the very beginning, it's like all a bit of political game, understanding the product, understanding the vocabulary, and also trying to build those design skills to understand what are the different areas and different people in those different areas who might want to support you. And then maybe launch a small pilot project that will actually explain to people who you're going to work for or with, right? Just what exactly is that value that you're bringing to the table. And the good way to do that is to listen very carefully to some of the common, I would say, challenges or frustrations or slowdowns that people experience a lot. There are always those things that people are really, really frustrated by, confused by, worried about, or anything like that. There are sort of kind of pain points that we have. And typically, if it's not that, then there are constraints. Maybe there is a person or a group of people or technology or anything like a tool, a CMS that is a really big bottleneck. Like everybody hates it, but nobody really wants to say it loudly because it's been a conversation for many, 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 many years now. And if you know about those things, what you can do is reflect back to people around you what you have discovered. Now, this is what your product does. These are the features that are really, really important to us. These are the people who have benefited from the work that I'm doing in your company, right? If you just reflect back, saying, I'm not here to break your flows, to, to change to change the way of how you're working or kind of disrupt in a way processes that are established. But I'm here to help you basically be more efficient. And if I can do my job, then you probably will benefit or you will find a way to benefit from that. So we need to kind of flip that coin and tell that story. And that's really sort of a storytelling there. And there is nothing related to pixels yet at this point, right? It's just all about, hey, that's me. That's what I do. This is what kind of work I'm doing. And this is similar work that has been done in that company. So I assume that if we're working on this without disrupting the flows that you have, right, that we can probably increase efficiency. We can reduce errors or mistakes or anything like that. We can help people find things faster, right? Or eliminate dead ends or anything like that. That's what I'm here for, right? Anybody wants to benefit from that, maybe? And you kind of start initiating a little project where you kind of zoom in and dial in all the way into something that hurts most people. Ironically, this is usually not related to like UI at all or even UX. Mostly it's meetings. Because people are either too frustrated by meetings or they are kind of got used to the way of how meetings are. But if you could make meetings just a little bit better, this will have such a tremendous visibility, right? And of course, you would do it small in your small team that you're going to work on. And then before you know it, you might want to suggest it to the outer teams. And then before you go, before you even know, there will be the shift happening and it will be attributed to you, right? At least partially. And that's extremely valuable. And then, well, then you do your UX work. But as you can see, there is a long way there before you even get there. And sometimes I'm not saying that you have to do it, right? It could be just one single project, one off, and then that's it, right? But if you are, working for an organization, a company, you kind of really need to go through this process. And that requires a bit of politics, a bit of capital, and a bit of confidence.
Oh man, so much to unpack there. Yeah, I love what you said just about, building the relationships, listening, when you're kind of getting into the space and starting small. I think there's a lot there, not just for, designers who are trying to grab a foothold in the enterprise space, but also new product folks, right? Like new product managers, just how important it is to hear. Also really love what you said about, you'll hear the same pain points coming up. One of the more interesting things I heard about like road mapping a ways back was you don't need to write down every enhancement request that comes in because you'll know the things that are important because they'll just keep coming
They'll
up.
just keep coming up,
Yeah.
coming back.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to go back to something you said a little while ago, right? Like, you spend all that time and you're kind of spending your internal capital building up, but you're working in enterprise space. Like, not everything that you work on from a design standpoint gets to end up being pixels on a screen, right? Maybe the project ends up being deprioritized, or maybe, hey, some of that legacy technology that you're playing with makes this not feasible to actually implement. Yeah, in those scenarios, what advice do you have for designers to kind of, temper the frustrations that I imagine you feel?
I would say that, well, my main goal is to avoid those things from happening in the first place because I want to know that something isn't working before I even start designing it. right? That's kind of the important part. So whenever we have, let's say, some ideas and we maybe have prioritized those ideas with PMs, we kind of need to bring engineers on board as early as we can. So we can say, well, we want to do this, and this would be the flow, and this would be kind of the way of how we imagine this to work. Is it feasible? Can we do that with our technology? Do we need another technology? Can we do it with our legacy and whatever, right? And then you kind of get feedback. And sometimes it will be well, positive, sometimes it will be negative, but I think it's important for me not even to know if this is a good idea or bad idea, kind of this sort of feedback, but is it even feasible? Can we actually pull it off? And if we do, will it be like a month-long project? Will it be a year-long project and so on? Um, I mean, because very often, like for example, if you take just something very, very practical, I know that not many people are excited about this, but I kind of am. URLs, right? Sean, how do you feel about URLs? Like in general, do you feel like you love URLs and this you want to?
I guess I could take them or leave them.
Oh, Sean, you just broke my heart right there. Right. So I'm really kind of very careful about URLs. And so one of the things that we wanted to look at is how do we establish consistent, clear, um, well, accessible, I guess, URL schema, right? And if you have, let's say, 130 websites, all living God knows where, right? Creating any kind of consistency, not even in terms of URLs, but like visually and content-wise and information architecture-wise, is very, very challenging. And so we start from the goal where we want to be. Right? We want URLs to be speaking their language. So people who are reading an URL, be it in Google search results or, hovering over references in ChatGPT or in Perplexity, they understand where they're going, right? And they also understand where to go from there, to go back and to go kind of sideways and stuff like that. And of course, before we even start thinking, okay, this is going to be the new URL schema, we need to consult with people who are managing all the different platforms and see what we can do there and what not and find compromises. And so before we suggest the best option, the best scenario, but then we review it together with engineers. And again, I don't even know, is it like my job to be doing URL guidelines? I don't know, but it's like it's also a part of UX, isn't it? I mean, somebody will have to read those and type them maybe on mobile and copy paste them and send them by email. So somebody has to design them, right? So, but then I need to understand what is viable and what isn't. And so for me, yeah, I am a big fan of showing unfinished work as early as I can. So that means, okay, we have this idea. Let's just discuss. Let's just throw in together, like get together on a Zoom call or whatever. And this is what we've been thinking. Is it viable? Is it doable or not? Right? And then if it is, then we can refine that. But of course, in the case that you are being, let's say, blocked by by legacy or anything else that might be making your project infeasible and not viable, well, that's then too late because those conversations must happen earlier, right? Like literally earlier. Otherwise, you'll be wasting maybe 1 or 2 months of time working on something that will never see the light of day. And for me personally, and I'm not trying to be difficult, frankly, but it's I had some projects where it was very devastating, right? Because I promised something and we can do this, we can pull it off, we can achieve that. And then it turned out not to be a disaster, but it was such an, well, it wasn't working as expected, right? And I don't want to be in this position, like ever. It's just, I need to deliver, right? And so when I promise to deliver, I need to deliver. I want to keep my promises. And that means checking in with other teams if what we're doing here, what we're suggesting here is even viable.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, I've struggled with it. Like, there's definitely an aspect of having to be flexible early with solutions and not falling in love with that solution that you've come up with and like keep working at it.
I mean, I do fall in love with solutions every single day, I think. And I feel like, oh, if everybody could only understand the beauty of this, right? And if I had a chance to test it with 100,000 people, sure enough, they will love it and they will appreciate it and they will, yeah, but no, sometimes it doesn't work this way.
If I had any advice for my younger self, it would be, hey, you need to stop worrying about being right and you need to start working with people to get it right. And I think your
Mhm.
concept of creating those early feedback loops is a way to get, is a way to get there.
Well, I just want to hug you now, Sean.
Younger Sean was fine. He just needed some help. So
Hey, we want to take a quick break from today's podcast to bring you some exciting news from the ITX Product and Design Conference team. The ITX Product and Design Conference is coming up June 25th and 26th at the Rochester Riverside Convention Center. Day 1 is going to be awesome. It's going to feature 4 unique workshops, 2 product and 2 design. Day 2, keynote day. You'll get great insights from our speakers, plus you can attend panel discussions and even participate in live recordings of the podcast. I've had a great experience every year I've been there. I come away, I've learned something, I'm inspired. So come check out our website. You can get the full 2-day agenda, as well as the link for register yourself and your teammates. The website is itx.com/conference 2025. That's itx.com/conference 2025. And you should come and visit Sean and I over at the recording stage. Yeah, we'd love to see you there. All right, let's get back to the conversation. Let's do it.
So, something that I find myself doing a lot these days is coaching people on setting success metrics early on in their process, because we've been talking a lot about early process today. I've been working through this goals, signals, and metrics process, and using, going back to, it's a little old school, but going back to the Google Heart framework, trying to help people come up and learn ways defining success for their changes, because good ideas have to in some way be measurable in the end. How do you define success, or how do you define success metrics from a UX perspective versus versus a product perspective?
Yeah, so basically, the main difference I think for me is that I try to be as close to what people are doing as I can. Let me explain what I mean by that. Um, we do when we try to establish some sort of metrics, we try to be making sure that they're working on 2 different levels, on the local level and on the global level. Local meaning I might be working with a team that's working on search, right? And they are trying to improve search, and they're trying to improve the filtering experience within search and search results and autocomplete and all of that stuff. And so what we need to identify are, let's say, 10 to 12 tasks that are coming from research and analytics, where we know that people are doing those things within search, right? So if we know that people are doing those things in search, then we can probably say, all right, let's try to dial up the success of people getting where they want to be, and dial down the frustration they'll be getting by getting 0 results pages or inconsistent or incompatible filters or anything like that. So we're defining or selecting 10 to 12 tasks based on the research that has been done before to understand how well are people actually performing those tasks. And these are supposed to be representative tasks what people are doing most of the time. Think about, let's say, a fintech application. In a fintech application, you might have stocks, and within stocks, you need to be able to filter. Maybe filter by an industry, filter by specific market cap, filter by specific PE value, and whatnot, right? So we can come up with 10, 12 tasks that people are supposed to be able to perform relatively quickly and, what's most important, accurately. Right? And that must be coming again from analytics. So we look and we define 12 tasks or statements. And we bring people in if we can. Sometimes we don't have access to users, but if you can, we bring people in and we give them those tasks to complete. And then we see how well they complete these tasks and how much time they need to complete them. Right? And from that, you can basically get a very simple, like literally the simplest of them all metric. One of them is the success rate, how successful people are in kind of getting where they want to be. And on the other hand, also the time on task, just how much time do they actually need to complete them. You bring in something like 15 to 20 people, and of course, it's not like it's statistically significant. It's not like a paper they can write about it, right? But you can kind of get to trends, and you try to figure out what are people more likely to succeed, or are they more likely to fail, especially if you're looking at a specific group of people, or being experts in a particular domain, or people who have some experience with the product, and you kind of need to segment it in the way that you need. And so that would be the local level, right? So if you're working on search, you'll be measuring how people are searching, right? With 10 to 12,000 that people are using. It might be connected with filters and so on and so forth, right? But on the other hand, what I also want to achieve is that the product is working globally. And that means we're looking at the level of the entire product. What are people doing here? Like one important task that probably every product will include is onboarding. But onboarding is not just somebody, clicked on the button and then went through the, I don't know, 5, 6 screens of onboarding and that's it. Onboarding in my book is somebody gets on a page, they go through a series of actions, interactions, and then eventually they get to the first success, first meaningful success, whatever that is. It could be imported portfolio on a product, it could be something that's set up that represents the interest or anything. It cannot be an empty page. An empty page is not a success in terms of onboarding to me, right? And so we come up then with 12 tasks that are living on the global level. Checkout would be one of them, onboarding would be another one. And we see how people perform those tasks. And these are very simple metrics, right? Tasks, complete success rate, and how much time people actually need to complete these tasks. And then depending on the product that we have, right, we kind of need to establish maybe something that goes and lives beyond that. Like, for example, if you're dealing with forms a lot, then one thing that will be important for you is not just how successful people are in completing those tasks and how much time they need to complete it, but also how accurate the input is. So we're looking at form accuracy input, right? Or form input accuracy, that would be correct, I guess. Or also at things like error message recovery rates, right? Meaning just how impactful and how disastrous are error messages. I think that most organizations just massively underestimate the impact of error messages. Because if an error message doesn't communicate what is wrong and how to fix it, it can cause, and I've seen these cases in the past, can cause a massive abandonment and also a massive delay, especially when we're talking about enterprise applications. People are just blocked, they have to start over, they don't understand why it's like that. Think about something like mortgage application reviews, right? It's just really, really, really expensive. And so if we don't consider that, that's kind of an issue. And so just to sum up, so we're looking at the local level. So I'm working, let's say, as a designer on that thing, let's say search or checkout or whatever. So I'm measuring what's happening here. But on the global level, and every vertical will do that, right? But on the global level, we're looking also at some tasks, like 10 to 12 tasks, that represent more or less full customer journey from onboarding, right, to, I don't know, doing something that's important for the business somewhere as a regular part of the work, to offboarding as well, right, closing account and stuff like that, right? And it all must work, right? Some of those things will be more important to business than the others. Some of them will be more important to users than the others. So we need to find that balance, and we sign them off, and then we have a metric that we can measure every those things we can measure maybe every 3, 6, 8, 9 months, depending on the velocity of the team. And that's it. That's a great start of your measurement journey.
Yeah.
So who's actually kind of monitoring those metrics in this model?
That's a good question. Like sometimes, like in the case of right now where I'm working, it's me, right? But of course, as on a global level, right? But of course, as we're looking at local level, that would be like the individual teams and probably UX lead on that individual team who'll be tracking to making sure that it's actually performed. I mean, in the end, it depends if you have researchers on the team or not, right? Sometimes it's not. But then, of course, then that brings up a question about the PM, right? At which level and how will PM want to be involved? And because from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I have seen that PMs are usually way more interested in business metrics than they are in UX metrics. And so I'm kind of playing this counterpart role of bringing in UX metrics to the table that are then complemented with business metrics, and both of them end up being displayed in a dashboard somewhere, senior C-level people, right? But I'm kind of responsible for these UX metrics then.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? Because you have the world where products tracking some metrics, UX is tracking more. Now, right, as a designer, you're worried about having awesome user design, making sure it's accessible, making sure it's wired up for metrics, and right, your breadth is expanding and expanding at the same time, right? The product manager's breadth is expanding and expanding. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on just kind of the overlap that we are finding, more and more common these days
Mhm.
between, designers and product managers, and how we can work best together.
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's all a matter of alignment and decision making, I guess. So if some PMs want to be taking over this part, That's great. That's fantastic, because some of them are just happen to be more on the UX side anyway. They're very interested in what's happening in the UX anyway. Very often you would hear, of course, PMs being the voice of the customer, and so that kind of only makes sense. But on the other hand, I think there are a lot of companies that are very much business driven, and so UX is almost like a thing that is, and along with UX metrics, is sort of a thing that is living inside of that UX department or UX departments or UX teams, so they kind of own it. And frankly, I am a big fan of owning them, because then if you're working, let's say, on that search team, and you're being measured, or you are measuring how well people can search in your product, then you can say, well, this is what it was before, let's say 6 or 8 months ago, and then we rolled out a change 2 months ago, and this is what it is now, and that can be attributed to us, because again, we just test the same tasks. And we see that people are performing much better than that, right? And so that they did in the past. And so this is kind of direct attribution to the impact of our work. And so that's something that we own. That's something that we visualize and explain. That's something that we report regularly. And this is the definition of our success for our team.
Love it. UX will always be more than a thing to me, Vitali.
Aw, that's nice to hear that. Yeah.
One of these
It's-
days,
it's
maybe
definitely
we'll work
mutual.
together beyond just the podcast, and maybe
I'm sure.
maybe we can build something cool. This has been an amazing conversation today. I really want to thank you for your time. I want to close with some takeaways, but then I want to talk about the product and design conference. So, some takeaways for me. When you're participating in enterprise work, make sure that you are aware of your role in risk management. And while that may make you a disruptor, don't fear those legacy systems, right? Find a way to prove the value of what you're trying to do and approach that risk in a tactful manner, because there may be politics tied to it. There may be
I mean,
long-term decisions that people weren't responsible for tied to it.
Sean, you're much better than ChatGPT, I have to say.
Thank you very much. I'm getting pretty good at this now. I really liked your idea around starting small to build trust, and using like focusing your vocabulary on the language of your stakeholders, right? So that you're all speaking the same thing. You should be the one adjusting if you are coming in as the disruptor. I really like that point. And then frustrations or slowdowns are often indicators of a constraint, right? So if I'm frustrated about something, there's a constraint that I have had to play with for a long time that I'm not communicating correctly. And then one that if Sean Flaherty is listening this to somewhere on, he's the former head host of this podcast. He's listening to this on 2x speed on his treadmill. He's going to be overjoyed that we spent a lot of time talking about relationships and the importance of relationships and building great relationships with the people that you're talking to. It's just something to always enforce, right? Your job is not necessarily to make everybody happy, but your job is to create a workable environment no matter where you are or what you're doing. So really great thoughts today. Thank you so much for your time. I want to take some time to talk about the product and design conference that we're holding here in Rochester, New York at the Downtown Convention Center on June 25th and 26th. You're hosting a workshop. What are we doing?
Yes. Oh, well, entirely different. Has nothing to do with what we have discussed at all, because we are obviously going to the world of, I don't know if you heard about it, just emerged recently, AI.
Oh, we are contractually obligated, I think, to talk about it.
We are.
the
Oh, my
episode,
God.
so this is perfect.
Yes, I think there is this thing that's called AI, and a lot of people are speaking and discussing and debating and reviewing and even implementing this even in enterprise applications, believe it or not. So this is like happening. And so my hope is to bring a bit more clarity to designers in what it means. And that's kind of partially based on some of the experimental work that I was doing. But also, I would say there are a lot of things that we expect from AI and that we believe AI can do and that we kind of bring or try to bring to products. But the reality is that AI is this really weird thing. Because, well, while software is typically kind of predictable and reliable, and if you click on a button, then it does some, well, not all software is like that, but most of the time what people are expecting is that you click on a button and you want to export an Excel sheet and it will be exported, or Excel sheet. But what happens sometimes is with AI, you can basically generate something that is not reliable, and very often it will be around 10 to 15% of the time it will be unreliable. So how can you actually integrate something like that in something that people need to rely on? So if I think about something like, again, a financial application, right, and you want to kind of highlight or explain to people what they need to be investing in, you can't use AI for that because it will be, incorrect or giving incorrect assumptions or suggestions 10, 15% of the time. You can't do that. And I mean, you can say, well, you should not trust AI, right? But then why would people want to use that feature if you cannot be trusted, right?
Mhm.
So the question then is, how do we bring in AI into this sort of environment? And even not in that environment, like, in maybe in others. I mean, we have agents that can double check each other, right? So to increase accuracy, but that comes at the cost of time. So you probably have seen all these deep research features in Perplexity and in ChatGPT and so on. Yeah, they're great, but then not everybody wants to click on a button and wait for 3 minutes
Yeah.
until something happens. So sometimes speed is really, really important. So basically, what I'm trying to do is to bring a lot of those little things that are important for us to know as designers, right? And also product people, just to see what do we do with that thing. It's kind of this magical box that can do whatever we want, but not in a predictable way that we used to, right? And so how do we make it better? And the quick clue to that is that's definitely not going to be a text box which you can type into because people are very bad at articulating their intent, right? And so there are also a lot of different patterns of what different teams are doing and how they are kind of making AI work nicely and neatly while still being kind of a bit unpredictable at times. And so all of that will be a big part of the workshop where we're going to go through hundreds of examples and also some patterns, which I'm sure, Daniel and Sean, if you join, you will not like because they will be quite challenging and not something that we're used to on the web.
I haven't negotiated yet, but I am going to find a way to break into one of your workshops. So don't worry. You will see me sneaking in the back at some point.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it.
But it sounds so engaging. It's like a topic that needs to be discussed and that people really need to up their game on now, because if we don't get a good foundation this world is that AI world is gonna race ahead without us, right? It's coming whether we like it or not.
For
Thank
sure.
you so much for your time today. This was an amazing episode.
Thank you so much,
Really-
Sean. Thank you so much, Daniel, for having me.
Well, that's it for today. In line with our goals of transparency and listening, we really want to hear from you. Sean and I are committed to reading every piece of feedback that we get, so please leave a comment or a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. Not only does it help us continue to improve, but it also helps the show climb up the rankings so that we can help other listeners move, touch, and inspire the world just like you're doing. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next episode.